Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
And I am your host, Vanessa Anceloni, here live at Kardec Radio. The show today is beautiful because we're going to talk about spiritualism and spiritism. And much more than this, because it's all about the collaboration between like-minded minds in the United States and everywhere in this planet. We'd like to share with you that spiritism is much more than just spirit phenomena. For many people, they are concerned about being spirits and whether spirits are around and we see them. But Kardec was so insightful, my friends, because he not only got the insight on the spirit phenomena, but he understood the moral perspectives and concept of it, which is phenomenal too. We have here on our show today our guest, Tom Cressley, who will soon talk to our listeners and explain a whole lot about Angel Jackson Davis' spiritualism and the beautiful collaboration between spiritism and spiritualism in the United States of America. Our show, when we talk about immortality, we are talking about our true lives. We are spirits. We are souls, as says Kardec, because we are incarnated. An incarnated person, spirit, then is a soul. And what does that mean? It means that our lives, in general, are true sowing moments for immortality. So every time we do, say, feel something, we need to think about seeds that we are sowing in the soil of life. In that regard, Kardec himself, in the many questions he asked the spirits in 1857, is publishing this amazing, groundbreaking book, the Spirit's Book. He saw that clearly there is continuation of life. And in this show, we're going to learn a lot, especially cases of the afterlife. In the book Heaven and Hell, Kardec discloses many interesting cases of true accounts of spirits, people who departed and came back, telling us their stories. What happened to them, the reasons why they had to leave that life with X, Y, Z harsh conditions, and then they came back to tell us how they departed, if it was easy, if it was complicated, if it was disturbing, and why they lived the lives they lived. You're going to hear to a beautiful case today. After all, many people, when they think about death, they think about heaven, hell, and purgatory. Do they exist? Let's reframe the concept of heaven, hell, and purgatory. Kardec himself, on question 1013, asks the spirits, what is hell? And the definition is very framed. The Spiritist teachings are universal, and they tell us about life. They tell us that hell is a life of extreme harsh trials, marked by uncertainty of an end to it. So hell can be right here, or it can be in the afterlife. It doesn't matter. So when we go to the spiritual realm, we're not going to hell. We are actually going to where our mind has always been. So if we are in hell here now, feeling this extreme harsh, marked by uncertainties, then it's going to be elsewhere. Then what is purgatory? Kardec in question 1013, and the hell was 1014. He asked what is purgatory, and the answer is amazing, because they say is physical and mental suffering is what we need to understand about purgatory. It's a time for reevaluation and the beginning of rehabilitation. They explain, it is almost always on earth that you create your own purgatory and where you make up for your fault. Aren't these inspirational? Dear listeners of Kardec Radio, we need to spread this out. So we free people from the fear of dying and fear of living. Because when we get to know that we are in the very heaven, or the very hell, or the very purgatory, wherever we are, no matter if we're incarnated or discarnated, life in the spiritual realm is going to be a continuation of what we are here. Nobody becomes a saint in the afterlife. And we're going to see with a case today. Now I know, and I bet you want to know more about heaven. But to know more about heaven, we'll give a break.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Kardec Radio, live, every Saturday at 11 a.m. Enrich your spiritual senses and deepen your foundations of Spiritism with the book, What is Spiritism? By Allan Kardec. Buy your copy online or via your ebook reader. Go to www.ediceiofamerica.com today.
And now, Kardec Radio, nourishing your soul.
This show is all about spiritualism and spiritism, and we have the honor to receive in our studio Reverend Tom Cretsley from the Lilydale Assembly, upstate New York, one of the, let's say, disciples of the great Andrew Jackson Davis. But before we get to Tom Cretsley in a few seconds, we want to share with you what we were talking just before. We were talking about immortality. Spiritism and spiritualism, they're not here to entertain ourselves with stories of spirits. They are here actually to invite us to a deeper understanding about our true nature, our spiritual nature. And Kardec himself is a great educator of the souls on earth and a good fire of spiritism. When he published the first book, the Spirit's Book, he shared with us the teachings of the wise spirits. Because, by the way, when we depart to the spiritual realm, we don't become all wise just because we don't have the body. How many people go to see psychics and mediums, and they are mistaken, thinking that whatever spirit is going to come is going to enlighten them. But what about the spirits of criminals? How can they become enlightened just because they departed to the spiritual realm? So we're going to learn with the Kardec and Andrew Jackson Davis many teachings on the rules, the spiritual laws of spirit communication. And one of them is that we ask wise spirits, we're going to get wise answers, such as the one when Kardec asked. We were talking about the afterlife, heaven, hell, purgatory. And where's the spirit answer to Kardec that hell is this life of extreme harsh trials marked by uncertainty, which not necessarily means only the afterlife, can be right here and now. And purgatory can be right here on earth as well. When we make up for our faults, we evaluate and rehab ourselves, then what is heaven? I know you want to know. Let us hear what the spirits, the wise and illuminated spirits of the Spiritist codification told us about heaven. They said, it is the universal spatial part in the universe. It is the planets, the stars, and all the more elevated spheres where spirits exercise and enjoy all their abilities without the trials of the material world or the pain common to undeveloped states. This is the answer to question 1016 in the Spirit's Book by Allan Kardec. So heaven is this universal space. It is the planets, the stars, and all the more elevated spheres where spirits exercise and enjoy their abilities without the trials of material life. That does not vouch for the fact that it's a specific area in the universe. It's actually telling us that it belongs to a realm where we're less attached. Of course, we can have a whole lot of program to talk about this, but let's go deeper into how these teachings came about, and especially the interaction between spiritualism and spiritism. And for this, we have the honor to receive here Reverend Tom Cretsley. He is the Assistant Director of the School of Spiritual Healing and Prophecy, former Director of the Lilydale Assembly, a dynamic teacher and healer, and he's a very joyful teacher who opens the hearts of all who work with him. His education includes a bachelor degree in at the University of Buffalo, and he's also studied psychology and religion at Harvard Divinity School. He has traveled extensively for over 39 years, teaching and healing throughout the U.S. and Canada. And by the way, for you who don't know, Tom Cretsley was the one who opened the doors to the Spiritist community. In 2004 was our first encounter when our dear friend Paula Schmidt took me to Lilydale to visit them and introduced me to Reverend Tom Cretsley. And since then, our friendship and collaboration blossomed each and every year. And in the year 2006, he was the host of the first Spiritist Weekend in Lilydale, when we were able to bring Divaldo Franco for the first time, and he gave a 4-hour workshop all about mediumship. And by the way, if you want to buy these, you can go to Spirit Side of Baltimore's bookstore and buy the DVD. You'll be impressed. And of course, it's in English and in Portuguese, so you won't be troubled if you don't speak one of the languages, because you have both. And if you're there listening to us and you want to ask questions to Reverend Kretsley, you can call in at 858-769-4705. And now with you, our friend Tom Kretsley. Hi, Tom. How are you?
Hi, Vanessa. It's nice to be with you.
Thank you for joining us. We are so delighted, and this is such an important topic for us. Tom, I would like to ask you right away. Many people may not be fully aware, especially elsewhere in the world. In the United States, we know people know a lot about spiritualism. But what is spiritualism? Is it a religion, Tom?
It is a religion and a philosophy. And it's interesting that you would say that not around the world. Actually, there are not a lot of people in America that actually know about spiritualism these days. It's a very, very small religion in terms of numbers. Yet, I think there are many, many people who, if they knew the basic principles of the philosophies, would count themselves as being philosophically, anyway, aligned with spiritualism. Yeah, the philosophy is very similar. You know, you had a wonderful introduction and a wonderful way of kind of highlighting all the main points of really what I see as important connections between spiritism and spiritualism. Philosophically, we believe in personal responsibility. We believe in evolution of consciousness, and it never ends, and that we're constantly moving and growing spiritually. That even the suffering that you talked about from our perspective, and certainly from the perspective of Andrew Jackson Davis, is an aspect of our evolution.
That's interesting. And talking about Davis and everything, and you're talking about the principles of spiritualism. I know there is so much story, and I remember when you kindly shared your point of view and the many teachings of spiritualism in a beautiful interview you gave 2 years ago at the Spiritist magazine. And one of the things we discussed at the time, Tom, I think you remember, and I think our listener would be delighted to know a little more, how everything began. I mean, people had these traditional religions, and then how did spiritualism become a religion? Yeah.
Some historical background, yes. Well, it was interesting, and all of this stuff began, the beginnings of spiritualism began when there was really a general questioning of the way in which things were happening in the world in general. It was the emergence of science in the 19th century. And there was also this atmosphere of freedom in the United States, which was a very new country at the time, and people were very excited about the meaning of freedom and what that meant, and began to explore, well, if I'm free politically, it opened people's minds to begin questioning other things. We had the transcendentalists who were engaging in Eastern philosophies and beginning to put a crack in the accepted views of religion of the day, and they introduced the idea of natural law, which then the spiritualists took to a whole new level. Andrew Jackson Davis was a young man who was totally ignorant at the age of 17. He became interested. He'd only had maybe 3 months of formal school, and he could barely read or write. But he became interested in mesmerism, which at the time had a number of practitioners who had come over from Europe, from France, and other people had been trained in North America, and they were traveling around, and they would be putting people in these mesmeric states initially for healing. And they found that numbers of people, when they were put in these states, would exhibit unusual clairvoyant abilities. And it turns out Davis was one of these individuals. And his ability initially was medical clairvoyance. And so for about 2 years, he, on a daily basis, would be put into this trance state and do medical diagnostics. Many of our listeners here have heard of Edgar Cayce in the 20th century, but Andrew Jackson Davis was doing this in the 1840s, and he would give use medical terminology to provide diagnostics and offer cures. And he did this for several years. And then after a couple of years of this, his guides and teachers began bringing through other things, and they decided to start questioning the sources, the spiritual sources of this material. And the net result of that over a year or so was a book that was published, which was called Nature's Divine Revelation, A Message to Mankind, which became a cosmology for a world that was inclusive of science, which there had never been one before. And so it was really a remarkable book, and it was the only book that Davis did in full trance. The rest of his books, and he wrote something like 28 books, he had learned how to be self-consciously aware of these very high spiritual transmissions, and he could access them at will. But he was able to do this at like the age of 21, and could get information on any subject whatsoever, whether it be mathematics or foreign languages, even dead languages, etc. He could call on any information he wanted. But that first book was so sensational. It was published in many languages, and he was known around the world for it. Well, about a year after that was the beginning of modern spiritualism, and many of your listeners may know this, of course, the story of the Fox sisters.
Yeah.
And they were in upstate New York, and it was two little girls, and they had an older sister, but it was primarily Margaret and Katie Fox, who were the young girls, preteens, who were experiencing these rapping sounds in their cottage, and they learned how to communicate with these rapping sounds. And eventually it became a sensation in their area and attracted the attention ultimately of journalists from New York City. So that opened the floodgates, because there were people, and there have always been people who were sensitive to these things, but they were in the closet, of course, in those days. And so it all come out of the woodwork. They were the beginnings of it. And I think Andrew Jackson Davis, because of this new cosmology that was accepting of this kind of thing, and also put it in a framework that allowed people to understand it in a different way, it made it easier for the culture to begin to accept this. And so spiritualism spread like wildfire throughout North America at the time, and eventually gravitated over to Europe and England at first, and then the continent. And when it was over in the continent is when Kardec did his monumental research on it.
And then I have a question, because it's interesting in the Spiritist movement, especially, not necessarily in the books alone, but in the movement, we praise so much the Fox sisters. I know we also acknowledge the pioneering steps and the bright mind of Andrew Jackson Davis. But it's quite interesting that when I came to the United States and I got to know spiritualism, and especially learning from you, which makes so much sense, we should focus ourselves on so much that was so consistent with the teachings of Davis, whereas the Fox sisters, they became so controversial here. Can you tell us a little bit more about this, Tom?
Well, I think the Fox sisters are controversial to me too in many ways. I say it's unfortunate in some ways, and I'd have a lot of spiritualists would beg to argue with me over this point, but nonetheless, we're all entitled to our opinions on these matters. But I think it's unfortunate that the Fox sisters are put up as the central emblem of the whole religion, because they were young girls who were not emotionally equipped, I don't believe, to handle the public scrutiny that they would immediately be put under. And their lives were very difficult lives because of this. And they had not developed an internal strength to be able to deal with this, as I say, the public scrutiny and being under attack by a lot of traditional religionists. So there was a lot, it was a very difficult life for them. I think they both at one point took to alcohol. Only the older sister, Leah, who also became a medium, seemed to keep herself in balance with it. But it was a struggle for both the Fox sisters throughout their lives. And yet, there were stories of other mediums around that time who were very clear about what they were doing and why they were doing it, and its overall meaning in the movement forward of consciousness, in the movement forward of spiritual and religious freedom, and their understanding of it. Whereas I don't believe the Fox sisters ever had a handle on that personally.
Forgive me for interrupt you, but it's an interesting part because at the time, many people, you agree upon it, that they were entertaining themselves with spirit phenomena, and few were wise like David and then Kardec and others who actually went beyond the phenomena themselves and got the teachings and the implications of this interaction. And by the way, Tom, we have here something quite unique to show to our listeners before we continue this amazing conversation with you. When we go to Book Heaven and Hell by Kardec, he shared with us in the second part. I know the title is not very appealing, but it's very invitational if you go browse the book and learn about it's almost like reality show of the spirit, because he has cases on happy spirits, middling conditioned spirits, spirits who are repentant criminals, those who don't want to change themselves, suicidal spirits, and then accounts of spirits that had a very difficult life, true atonement, that he called terrestrial expiations or atonement. And we're going to show the first part of this case to our listeners, Tom. So then after we finish this, we'll be back to our conversation. So dear listener, this is the case of Clara Riviere. Listen to this now.
The story of Claire Riviere. Claire Riviere was a young girl who died at the age of 10. She belonged to a family of day laborers in a village in the south of France. From the time she was 4 years old, she had been entirely deprived of the use of her limbs. Throughout her life, she never uttered a complaint, never showed the least impatience. Although totally uneducated, she consoled her sorrowing family by talking to them of the future life and of the happiness she would enjoy in it. She died in September 1862, after 4 years of torture and convulsions, during which she prayed incessantly.
I am not afraid to die,
She frequently repeated.
because a life of happiness is awaiting me afterwards.
To her father, who was weeping, she said,
Be comforted. I shall come to visit you. My hour is near. I feel it, but when it comes, I shall know it and will warn you of it beforehand.
Just before she died, she called all her family to her bedside, saying,
I have but 5 minutes to live. Give me your hands.
They did so, and she died at the moment she had indicated. After her death, a rapping spirit frequently disturbed her parents' house, upsetting everything, striking heavy blows on the tables, shaking curtains and clothes, displacing cups and platters. The spirit of Clara herself appeared to her younger sister, 5 years old, who asserted that she frequently came and talked with her, and who often exclaimed joyfully,
Oh, look at Claire, how pretty she is.
Evocation of Clara Riviere.
I am beside you, ready to reply to your questions.
Whence did you derive, young and uneducated as you were, the elevated ideas you expressed in regard to the future life before your death?
From the shortness of the time I had to pass on your globe, and from my preceding incarnation, I had been a medium during the previous life, and I was a medium when I came back among you. My last life was the result of predestination. I felt and I saw all that I stated.
How could a child of your age refrain from uttering a single complaint through 4 years of constant pain?
My physical suffering was controlled by a still greater power, that of my guardian angel, whom I beheld constantly beside me. He reduced the pains I felt, and he rendered my will superior to my suffering.
How did you foresee the moment of your death?
My guardian angel had told me when it would take place. He was never mistaken.
You said to your father, "Be comforted, I shall come to visit you." Why, having felt so affectionately toward your parents, do you now torment them by making such a racket in their house?
They have to undergo this trial, which it is my mission to direct. Do you suppose there is no end to be gained by these disturbances? The noises, movement, and confusion determined by my presence are a warning to the entire neighborhood. I am assisted in this work by spirits whose turbulence is employed in view of an aim to be attained, as I also have an aim in appearing to my sister. Thanks to these visitations, many will be convinced of the reality of another life. My parents had to undergo a trial. It will soon be ended, but only after having brought conviction to many minds.
It is not you, then, in your own person, who produce those manifestations?
I am seconded by other spirits who serve as an agents of the trials appointed to my dear parents.
How could your sister have seen you if it is not you who produced these manifestations?
My sister saw only me. It is not the last time I shall come to console and encourage her.
Yeah, dear listener, this is the story of Clara Riviere, the book Heaven and Hell by Allan Kardec, the story of the spirits who are in the spiritual realm and tell us how they lived. How amazing is it, Tom, that we get a spirit telling us a child who departed and came back to share these teachings, that the guardian angel can be so helpful at times of pain and sorrow as well. It's very consoling too, don't you think, Tom?
I think this is a wonderful illustration of the real import of spiritualism and spiritism and mediumship in general, and that is that there's always a good purpose and a reason for these communications. That the reason is about uplifting our consciousness, is about teaching us about, like as you mentioned earlier, moral values, about personal responsibility. All of that is in this story, and it's in a beautiful way.
And Tom, when you talk about the moral values and told before about the divine laws, the natural laws, you are a scholar who is all the things you know regarding the spiritualist background. You are an expert in the teachings of Andrew Jackson Davis, and later on, after the break, we'll talk about when Divaldo Franco mentioned a very interesting thing about your relationship with Davis. But anyhow, can you tell us more about the importance of studying Andrew Jackson Davis, please?
I would have to say this. Without the writings of Andrew Jackson Davis, I probably would not be a spiritualist. And in fact, I even call myself a harmonial spiritualist, because his overall philosophy was called the harmonial philosophy. And it really was this wonderful blend of philosophy that taught how to integrate the phenomena into a greater understanding of the picture of the universe in which we exist and our role in that universe as human beings, and the importance of this of the moral teachings. Davis himself pulled away from spiritualism toward the end of his life because he saw too much attention on the phenomena and not enough attention on the philosophy. And it's how important it is for people to live the philosophy in their overall development. So without him, I don't think I'd be able to accept all of spiritualism.
Yeah, and then as you're saying, the teachings, we also need to study more about Davis and match. Whenever I read Davis, it reminds me so much about the teachings that came about through Chico Xavier, especially André Luiz. But I have more questions for you, Tom. I know you have so much to tell us, but
well, can I say something just really quickly, because I think this is a wonderful side note on this, because Chico Xavier was born the year Andrew Jackson Davis died. I think that's it says something about how the universe keeps these brilliant minds coming to us.
You're right.
Yeah.
And I know you have more to share in that regard, but let us give one more break for a few messages, and we'll be right back with Tom Cressley and on spiritualism and spiritism.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Spiritist Network, your gateway to on-demand Spiritist videos. www.spiritistnetwork.com.
Spread the word. Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
Now in English, the book Among Brothers of Other Lands by several spirit authors. Psychograph by Chico Xavier and Valdo Vieira. Buy your copy online or via your ebook reader. Go to www.ediceiofamerica.com today. Kardec Radio, live every Saturday at 11 a.m.
And now, Kardec Radio, nourishing your soul.
And we are here on a very special show about spiritualism and spiritism. Honored to have our friend and collaborator, Tom Cressley, from Lilydale Assembly. Lilydale is a very special city. As Divaldo Franco said in 2006, it is a city out of this planet. It's really a special place that is hidden because it's so treasurable, let's say this way. And Tom Cressley is talking to us now live from Lilydale Assembly. Tom, right before the break, we were talking about Andrew Jackson Davis, and even before that, the Fox sisters in the case of Clara Riviere. And many people may be wondering now why Clara, the girl of 10 years old, as in the account published in the book Heaven and Hell by Kardec, suffered so much from age of 6 to age of 10 with convulsions, being paralyzed. And we ask, is there a reason for her? Tom, when we talk about spirit communication and life, we talk also about the possibility of reincarnation. How do you see it? And could you tell us more about how spiritualism, if possible, how spiritualism sees the
concept of reincarnation?
Exactly.
Well, I have to say this, that within spiritualism, there's been a conflict over reincarnation. There's a good number of spiritualists that are avid anti-reincarnationalists, if you could put it that way, and yet I would say probably the majority of spiritualists tend to believe in reincarnation in some way. My personal belief is that I almost can see no other way to fit it, to make an understanding of it. But oddly enough, Andrew Jackson Davis was not a proponent of reincarnation, which surprises me. But the thing that's wonderful about Davis and his philosophy is he always said, if you cannot find a way to put this in your consciousness that suits both your reason and your intuition, then don't accept it. Don't accept anything I say if it doesn't match with your own pure reason and your own pure inspiration. So but I've come to understand this in a slightly different way. For me, I do believe that when a personality dies, that personality does continue to grow and evolve on other planes. I don't believe the personality itself reincarnates. I believe an aspect of that soul reincarnates while the personality from the past life continues to grow and evolve.
And allow me this, Tom. Probably it's about, as we often learned in Spiritism, it's about words, and it reminds me of a computer. Computer, you may have all the files that can run in different softwares. And as you're saying, let's say personality can be a correlate to a specific program or a file, a specific file. And then not necessarily when you reincarnate, you're going to open the file. And then, of course, you're not talking about that very personality coming back, but then you have the blossoming of another part of you, the development of a new personality. It's another side. That's why in one of the questions about to the spirit, which was about art, he asked, which is quite interesting because we're studying, we're going to have a summer retreat with our children and youth in a week in the spiritual side of Baltimore, and it's going to be about art and spirituality. And Kardec asked this question: is it possible for somebody who's a genius in the arts come back and not remember anything? And they said yes, maybe as a way and means for the person who didn't use it well or abuse it, use it more wisely by being blocked temporarily, so the knowledge is there. Let's say like computer language, right?
Yes, here's where I do believe we may think of this as really, but to me it's not that complex. It's just that while that personality is continuing to grow and develop, and there's a new time and a new set of circumstances, and a new personality needs to grow and evolve, that's why the memory of the old one, the entire memory of the old one is not there. But facets of that memory, if they're meant to be a part of this incarnation, will come through.
Exactly. You know, we talked about Clara Revere, the girl who was 6 and then got paralyzed and suffered for 4 years and then departed to the spiritual realm and came back to tell us through Kardec's medium and through the questions of Kardec to know why. And we have here the second part of her case, which is her explanation on the reason why she came back in the conditions that she did. So, Tom, give me 2 minutes. We're going to listen to this and then discuss a little more.
Why were you, being so young, afflicted with so many infirmities?
I had to expiate the faults of a former life. I had misused health and a brilliant position in my preceding incarnation. God, therefore, said to me, "You have enjoyed immensely, without stint or measure. You shall suffer on the same scale. You have been proud, you shall be humbled. You have been vain of your beauty, you shall be as broken reed. Instead of seeking your own selfish satisfaction, you shall seek to acquire charity and kindness. I did what was appointed me by the divine will, and my guardian angel aided me."
Would you like to say anything to your parents?
By the advice of a medium, my parents have gone through many charitable acts. This is well, for man must pray, not with their lips only, but also with the heart and the hands. To give those who suffer is the true prayer for Spiritists. God has given to every soul free will, that is to say, the faculty of progressing to all. He has given the same aspiration, for which reason the humble garment of serge is nearer to the robe of cloth of gold than generally supposed. Apply yourself, then, to drawing your social classes near to each other by the exercises of charity. Bring the poor to your houses, encourage them, raise them, do not humiliate them. If this great law of conscience were practiced by the people of your earth, you would not have to undergo from time to time the great cataclysm that are a disgrace to nations calling themselves civilized, that are sent by God to punish them for their blindness and to make them open their eyes. My dear parents, pray, love, practice the law of Christ. Do to others only what you would have them do to you. When God sends you a trial, implore his aid in bearing it, and being imposed to his high and holy will, arm yourself as a preparation for the future. With courage and perseverance, you have still to suffer, and remember that you must earn admission to a happier world before you can enter it. I shall always be with you, dear parents. Goodbye, or better yet, until later. Cultivate resignation, charity, the love of the neighbor, and you will thus arrive at the abode of felicity.
The humble garment of serge is nearer to the robe of cloth of gold than is generally supposed, is a charming metaphor referring to the fact that these spirits pass, in their successive existences, from a brilliant position to one that is obscure and poverty-stricken, or vice versa, according as they have misused the one, or made, through patience and resignation, a good use of the other. The justice of this providential arrangement is too obvious to call for comment. Another thought, equally profound, expressed in the foregoing communication, is that which attributes the calamities of nations to their infractions of the law of God. For God punishes nations as he punishes individuals. It is certain that if nations practiced the law of charity, there would be neither wars nor any great troubles. The aim of Spiritism is to lead men to the practice of this law. Is that the reason why it encounters such violent opposition? Are the words addressed by the spirit of this young girl to her parents those of a demon?
And we are here talking about this case of this little child teaching us so much. And spiritualism and Spiritism have a similar view on this. What do you think?
I think it's a brilliant case, and I think it's what was meant to happen to open the human race to a higher consciousness, and to recognize that we are more than our bodies, number one, and that there is a much greater world than our homes and our material world, that we are all part of this greater world, and that we are continually growing and evolving, becoming closer to an understanding of the divine. And it's a beautiful story.
It is.
And a great lesson.
Yes. And a great lesson, right? There are so many teachings here, and there will be a show in the near future in which we're going to share several cases of the Spirit, and we're going to make comments on the many teachings. And Tom, we're talking about children here, and I know you have a daughter, and in Lilydale they also have a program to teach spiritualism and healing to children. But before you tell us more about this, I would like to invite a Spiritist friend of ours who also admires the work of Lilydale, and Naor Fonseca. He's in Boston, Massachusetts, and he's here with us now to talk a little bit about the important family retreat that they do. The Spiritist family retreat that is always done for several years, have been happening in a park in Connecticut. It not only unites several different Spiritist centers, but it mostly brings families together to share activities and learning experiences outdoors. And it's actually, I would say today, the largest Spiritist event in the United States. Hello, Naor. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be in this program with Tom and you, Vanessa.
Thank you. And we're just talking about the importance of teaching children, like the case of Clara Riviere, so much wisdom there. And you and Eduardo Guimarães have been the inspired mind to put together this beautiful event that has been happening for some years. Can you tell us more about it, Naor?
So we have been meeting in Connecticut for 8 years. So since 2003, I think, was the first one, or 2004. You do the math. 2004, yeah. And I was just looking at some numbers here, and we have always about 90 to 100 kids aged below 15 years old that go to this retreat. And we always try to it's called the Family Spiritist Retreat and not the Family Retreat for the Spiritist family. So we try to involve all the family, not always the kids or the parents are all spiritists. So we try to do a general program, and this year's program was focused on let's change the world, shall we? So it was an invitation for all of us to make a change in ourselves in order to change the world. So
now, let me ask a question, interrupt you a little bit. So you tell us more. So these 100 kids average, they bring their families. So you're talking about an average of a few hundred people there when you do such events, right?
Yeah, we have about 300 participants every year. The numbers fluctuate around, that target.
Okay, and then this year you had several activities. What were the highlights of this year's program?
One thing that we did was we collected stories of people that we admired for the work they have done in the world. One of them was this Canadian boy called Ryan, and he has a foundation called Ryan's Well. And I think he was 10 years old in Canada, and his, teacher was explaining that in Africa people had to walk miles to have access to clean water. And he was, alarmed that he had only had to walk like 6 feet to get to any tap in his house. So he asked his teacher how much money would be necessary to make a well. And the teacher told him it was like $200. So he collected money with family and friends. And when he went to the institution that was collecting the money to make the well, they said, well, I appreciate your offer, but actually each well costs $2,000. So the rest is sale. He created a larger campaign, and his foundation followed afterwards. And today he has helped more than thousands of families in Africa, not only to have access to clean water, but schools as well.
I see, and
for all of us.
And that's quite interesting, and we understand that the focus of the program every year is to give new tools and resources to the family so they can live better, but also focusing on the importance of spiritual teachings for kids, right?
Yeah, so that's why we said that to change the world, we need to change ourselves. So that's the bottom line message of spiritism, of any other religion, is to make better men, make better women, better parents, better children, make them more charitable, loving, and peaceful. So we always try to bring this message.
And Naur, what is the website for people to find out more information on this amazing program?
Sure. It's www.familyspiritistretreat, altogether in one word, .org. And I like to think of it, since Don is here, that it's one day of feeling how it is to live in Lilydale or any spiritual elevated place. We really feel a different atmosphere. We feel the spirits helping us and bringing all the blessings from above to all the families so they can recharge for another year.
Yeah, I remember being there a few times years ago. It's so inspirational, and it's a lot of fun. It's interesting that we can combine so much fun with so many teachings, and at the same time, the depths of the teachings do not refrain us from being inspired. On the contrary, they boost this joy inside of our hearts. I remember that, and I think that's the feeling that most people feel when they go to the retreat, right?
Yeah, they are very excited. We had this year an activity we call the Olympics, and we're teaching games to kids that instead of being competitive, they're cooperative. So everybody wins, everybody is having fun. So if you remember as a kid when you tried to play, basketball or soccer, many times you feel frustrated that nobody gives you the ball or your team loses. So this is very competitive, and there is a good aspect to competition, of course, and innovation comes from competition many times. But emotionally, a cooperative game is happier for everybody.
Exactly. I've often talked to Tom Cretty about these ideas about the importance of collaboration. I remember him teaching me so much about that. And you're here for us with the program. We'll probably bring Naur and his wife, Gabi, back to us to talk more about the importance of education to children and youth. But now, Naur, I'll bridge it up to Tom Cretty. I know you also have a question to him. Would you like to say it now?
Well, I'd like to invite him for the next year's retreat. He and his family are welcome.
Oh gosh, I'd really love to take part in something like that, but we were involved in a summer-long retreat here in Lilydale. It goes on all summer, and your description of it sounds absolutely fabulous. I love those kinds of meetings where it really does something to kind of stimulate that important aspect that we all have, our spiritual hearts, and creating connections at a higher level, and finding those personal and spiritual resources. And when you were telling us about the program, it just reminded me a little bit of what I think is the great parallel between Spiritism and spiritualism, is that we allow ourselves to enjoy resources that a lot of other religions don't, and that is those direct connections to spirit loved ones, those direct connections to angels, those direct connections to all these spiritual resources that we seek and we allow ourselves to have. I mean, I sometimes wonder how other people do it without that.
And I know, Tom, that Naur earlier was asking this question on regard, like, how is it to live in Lilydale? Right, Naur? You were asking this question as well?
Well, I know that if July or summer is the time open for visits, right? I would love to go and visit one time, too, with my wife. And we had been planning that for a few years now and haven't realized it yet. So, tell us, how is it like to live there, or how can we experience it in first hand?
Well, Lilydale has a Lilydale Assembly. If you just Google Lilydale Assembly, you'll find the website, and it has the full list of all that goes on here, the summer program. Now, there's several different features of what happens. Many people come to take the workshops, but there are daily experiences here in Lilydale that are available to everybody. There is a gate fee, which is nominal. It's like $10 a day. That helps to cover the expenses of running a large organization like this. But the rest of what goes on within the grounds is free. There are 3 services a day of public mediumship, where and they're outdoor services in benches in the forest, and the mediums will get up and give messages from spirit loved ones to those assembled, and that happens 3 times a day. And the thing I'm most involved with is the healing temple here, and there are 2 healing services a day. They're an hour long, and we have some wonderful committed mediums, healing mediums, who just go up there to serve. And all of this part of Lilydale is free, except for, of course, the gate fee. And there are hotels, and listed on our website and everything is places that you can stay. My wife and I have a guest house here too, and there are several. There's a couple of hotels run by the Assembly and several other guest houses.
Great. Thank you also, Naur, for joining us and telling us about the Family Spiritist retreat. We hopefully will have you back with Gabi in a whole program about the importance of spirituality for kids. Thank you again, Naur.
Well, but could you have a mini retreat in September or early June that I could?
Of course.
I would love to attend. Yeah.
Thank you. So thank you, Naur. All right. Now we have Tom. We'll give a short break and be back because there are more callers who would like to ask you questions, and we want to know more from you. So we'll be right back.
Okay.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Kardec Radio, live every Saturday at 11 a.m. Now in English, the book Among Brothers of Other Lands by several spirit authors, psychographed by Chico Xavier and Valdo Vieira. Buy your copy online or via your ebook reader. Go to www.ediceiofamerica.com today.
And now, Kardec Radio, nourishing your soul.
Dear listener, we are here at the last part of our show with Tom Kratzley talking about spiritualism and spiritism. There's so much to learn. It's about this new era of spirit on earth that began on, let's say, second half of the 19th century and is blossoming each and every year. It's giving us a new perspective of life, and it reminds me of a saying of the amazing Prentice Mulford in his book Thoughts Are Things, when he said, "The spiritual mind attaches little importance to decay, knowing such decay that spirit or the moving force in all things is simply taking the dead body or the rotten tree to pieces, and that it will build them up again as before temporarily into some other physical form of life and beauty." So much to learn from these great minds, right? I want us to tell a little bit more about this amazing collaboration between spiritualism and spiritism. You opened the doors for this.
Yeah, I think it really happened when, and of course you helped open those doors too, because when I invited you to a spiritualist conference, and I don't remember the year, but it was maybe was it 5 years ago or 6 years ago, something like that. And you came and delivered a wonderful program on spiritism, and then we had this wonderful opportunity to break up in small groups, and we sat in circle asking for spiritual guidance about particularly really about the future of spiritualism, not necessarily spiritism, because it was a spiritualist conference, but you were in the circle that I was in, and we both simultaneously got information from our guides about a bridge of light between Lilydale and Brazil, and we both understood that it was a bridge of light between spiritualism and spiritism. And from then on, things have begun to have unfolded somewhat, and we've shared times together. You coming and teaching and sharing here, and I've had the opportunity to speak at your center a couple of times, and I think that and as a result, a number of other people that I know, the spiritualists, have made connections with spiritism. And so, it starts small, and then who knows how rapidly it can snowball, but I hope it snowballs rather quickly.
Yeah, me too. And we've heard that this coming September, it's very likely that they are going to be able to screen one of the blockbusters in Brazil, the movie Astro City. In Brazil, they call it No Solar. Here, they renamed it to Astro City. It's based on one of Chico Xavier's psychograph books. And it's coming up. So very soon things are going to snowball, as you're saying. We hope our collaboration can spread out. I personally love Lilydale. Divaldo Franco admires very much. And having people like you there, many other friends. And I remember in 2006 when we had this special program. We brought Divaldo Franco, Maria Gertrudis, who was a mediumistic painter. And at the end of the beginning of the program was quite special because we were talking about reincarnation, and then Josiah Korngold kindly brought in the translation of one of Kardec's message, in which it sounded quite prophetic what Kardec said, because he said that the day he was as a spirit, this was when he was departed. It's published in the Spiritist magazine at Kardec's time, but it's posthumous. He came to Anna Blackwell in England. That meeting, it was like a mediumistic meeting, and had the American Mr. Peebles, the famous spiritualist, one of the main advocates of the time, right? But at that time, we spiritists were so ignorant of who Mr. Peebles was, and I remember opening the event with that message when Kardec, as a spirit, he says, And dear friends and spiritualists, the day you get together to revisit the concept of reincarnation, that's when you're going to be together forever, in other words. And he mentioned something specifically to Mr. Peebles. And when we gave the first break for that workshop, one of the people in the audience, one of the American spiritualists there present, he came up to me and said, "Do you know who Mr. Peebles is?" And I said, "Forgive me for my ignorance, but I don't." And then he told me a little bit more. "Do you want to know how he looks like?" And I said, "Yeah. Look to your left." And then there is, in that room, where we're doing the workshop, there is a picture of Mr. Peebles. And we're like, my goodness, this cannot be a random event. And then at the end, we had Dr. Bezerra de Menezes giving a specific message through the mediumistic skills of Divaldo Franco. How was the whole weekend for you in 2006, and how was especially for you to receive the message of Dr. Bezerra de Menezes?
It was really a monumental. Personally, for me, it was monumental. I mean, the opportunity to meet Divaldo Franco. He's one of the greatest people I've ever met in my life, and I don't say that lightly. And certainly, as great a spiritual teacher and leader as there is and has been on the planet in many years. The thing about that I love and appreciate so much about Divaldo is he's humble, and yet he has this enormous spiritual presence about him. There's this sense of love that's so pervasive. He's embracing his entire reality all the time, and if you happen to be anywhere in the neighborhood, you get embraced. It's just it was a very special time to be with him, to see him, and to see him just pop into his mediumship. He came and visited our both our library, but also at the museum. I could particularly remember when he was at the museum, and he began to start connecting to the people who founded Lilydale in spirit, and gave historical background that was almost pre-Lilydale. It was about the people who got together before Lilydale was even formed and nurtured the idea that would eventually become Lilydale, but they weren't even in the early stages of Lily. Our historian had to look up, and Divaldo gave first and last names of all these individuals. Our historian had to look many of them up to find out, and of course they were accurate. So his mediumship is phenomenal. But more than that, it's who he is as a person, and then when you know what he's accomplished and what he's done for his community, for his country, for the world, in his travels, in his lectures, in his teaching, it's just awe-inspiring. And unfortunately, a lot of Americans don't know. We tend to be so insulated here in this country, and I was so happy that we had a lot of Americans who were able to see what's happening elsewhere in the world, and the beautiful spiritual contributions that are being made all over the world, but particularly by Divaldo Franco.
As you said, we had Dr. Bezerra de Menezes on our first meeting in 2005 when we had the Spiritualist Conference, coming through us and telling us about the importance of bridging up Spiritism and spiritualism. And then the year after, when Divaldo comes at the end of the meeting, we were very moved by the surprising, because we didn't expect, right? We can't tell like the spirits will come for sure because it's on them to come. And when he delivered this message talking, and by the way, for people who want to know more about these events, you can both read the book on the whole workshop that Divaldo. It became a book because it became so popular. So many people were writing to us that we at the Spirit Side of Baltimore, we compiled the whole information and published it through Divaldo Franco's publisher, entitled The Dynamics of Our Sixth Sense. You can buy it at the Spirit Side of Baltimore, right? It's there in the document.
Oh, it was a wonderful lecture. sorry, was that wonderful lecture about with God and the brain and all that. It's really wonderful, and I also encourage people to get a hold of it.
We are here talking to Tom Kretzley. He is Reverend and Assistant Director of School of Spiritual Healing and Prophecy in Lilydale. He is one of the former directors and very active member of the Spiritualist movement. And he's here with us talking about spiritualism and spiritism. And we're going now to open the line for one of the listeners. And she's Kirsten DeMello, and she's here with us now. Hi, Kirsten. Hello, Kirsten.
Hey, how are you guys? Hi, Vanessa. Hi, Tom.
Hi. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure to be on this show, and I've been listening. And, Tom, it's really interesting, and as well, Vanessa, it's really interesting to listen to this about Lilydale. I've heard about it before from my parents and from various other people, and I'm really interested as well. I heard you comment with the other, Nell Fonseca from Boston, and I am, too, as well, interested in the activities and checking out Lilydale, I think, as a spiritist and sort of also assisting and also just being there, helping to be a bridge, because I think we have so much as spiritualists in general to come together and find a medium in the sense, find the common ground to see where we can work together in the future and just collaborate. And I don't know that I so much have a question, just as these comments, just to thank you for coming on. And I think it's so great because perhaps maybe not a lot of spiritists here in the U.S. or maybe the American-born ones perhaps don't know a whole lot about Lilydale. And I think it is a precious gem that sort of remains there, Lilydale, and it's a beautiful thing. And if you could recommend a day or a time in the year when you would recommend us people or spiritists in general to go, what time of the year is better, would you say?
Well, our full program only operates from the end of June, like the last weekend of June, to Labor Day, and that's when all the events are happening in the summer. Now, throughout the year, there are 3 churches on, and one is right just off the grounds, and they all have their programs throughout the year. They have, of course, the services and healing services and classes, but in the off season, which is 10 months, almost 10 months of the year, it's a very tranquil, quiet, peaceful place to come for meditation. For the grounds here are something very, very special. We have, as part of our entire complex here, a forest which is one of the top 5 old-growth forests east of the Mississippi. It's written up in a number of forestry books for the number of species of trees that it has, for the age of the species, and I find that really adds to the sacredness of this place. And the thing that's wonderful about Lilydale, and that's why I would encourage many people, our spiritist listeners and those who may not be spiritists who are listening out of curiosity, to come here and to experience what many people experience when they come here, is that sense of spiritual freedom. I hear this over and over again when people come here year after year. They say they feel free to talk about things that they can't talk about anywhere else. And there's so many people who have spiritual experiences that in their home church or in their neighborhood or wherever they come from, they don't feel free to talk about it, or even with their families. But there are many people having profound spiritual experiences, contact with spirits, contact with the angelic realms, etc., and things that happen in their lives. But they don't feel free to talk about it. Here they feel free to be with it, open it, and openly and express it.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Kirsten, for joining us. And we are here at the very end of this show. And Tom, I know we have a lot to learn from you, and we'll hopefully bring you back in the very near future. But would you like to share your final thoughts with our listeners at Kardec Radio?
Sure. Actually, my final thoughts are inspired by your opening comments. You were one of the things you talked about in your opening comments was connections, and I really do feel that in the evolution of human consciousness, that right now the connections that are being made, and particularly the spiritual connections, are absolutely crucial for where we're headed on this planet. And I know that it's been predicted in the works of Kardec, but also with Andrew Jackson Davis, that there is a time coming, and other religions have produced, but there is a time coming when we will have harmony and peace in this world. But I think these connections are vitally important, and that's why they're speeding up, and that's why we're actually getting more nourishment out of it. And we need to continue to foster these connections, these spiritual connections, and as we do that, I think we're going to find that we're getting even more guidance and support and fulfillment and upliftment from our spirit friends.
Oh, Tom, it's so inspirational, and we have a lot to thank you for being so kind and inspirational to all of us, and for being so embracing of all of us in the Spiritist movement in the United States. We are truly humbled by your, so much wisdom. And by the way, my friends, we were talking here to Reverend Tom Cressley. He is also a healer, and I forgot to tell you, but it's very important to mention, when Divaldo Franco was in the day in 2006, he came and he had a cold. Then we brought Divaldo Franco to the Healing Temple of Lillooet, which is an amazing place as well, and Tom Cressley teaches healing, which is for us in spirits we call passes. And Divaldo Franco received the passes or healing through Tom Cressley's hand. He mentioned it in his talk, the acknowledgement that Tom Cressley is a healer of the heart. So, Tom, we have a lot to thank you very much for being here with us in the show.
And I have to thank you, Vanessa, and I want to really thank the whole Spiritist community in the United States. I know I met a number of people at last year's conference down in Fort Lauderdale, and everyone in the Spiritist community that I've met has been so gracious to me, and so heartfelt, the connections, and to anyone who I met last year. I can't mention everyone's names, but I want to say hi and thank you, and I love you. I hope I reconnect.
For sure. Thank you, Tom. And you're talking to us about the Spiritist Symposium, which happened last year in Fort Lauderdale, when Mauricio Filho, the president, invited you to be there, which was very inspirational. And by the way, in 2 weeks, we're going to have a special show here with the United States Spiritist Council and a few American Spiritists sharing their stories, sharing the beautiful works that the Council has been doing. But next week we have also an amazing show. Dr. Bernie Siegel, the famous Dr. Siegel, is going to be here with us, sharing a lot as well. And we're so blessed to have Tom Cressley today, and continue the blessings, opening a new area for spirits and spiritists and spiritualists. And we wish the best to our spiritualist friends and collaborators in this important task of spreading spirituality to our planet Earth, to inspire people to look at our true nature as spirits. We talked about the importance of digging deeper, and we want to thank all the listeners who have been writing us amazing messages of gratitude and also inspiration, and those who write to us on Facebook, who share with us. Share more, my friends, because we want to hear what you want to hear. So if you send your comments through our website, KardecRadio.com, we are going to send you a Kardec Radio card sticker, and then you can share how much Kardec Radio is here to help us live a better life. Thank you so much. We'll be back next Saturday at 11 a.m. with Dr. Siegel on the program of Reflections on the Art of Healing and Living.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Kardec Radio, live every Saturday at 11 a.m. Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardecradio.com. Until next time, We wish you many blessings.